Have you ever researched your family's cultural and ethnic backgrounds? Do you know why your family came to America and why you partake in certain traditions? After interviewing my mother, Becky Shrinka, and my grandpa, Dan Shrinka, I found out that my family is both German and Czechoslovakian. During my interview with my mother, she said we came from a distant line of Germans that migrated here many years ago. But we don't share, we don't still have all the traditions from them. So after speaking with my grandpa, I was very interested in what the Czech culture was like. So I will be doing my speak on Czechoslovakia, which was originally one single country, state, and it's right there. There's Czech Republic and Slovakia. I became very interested in the Czech culture. He told me that we have certain traditions that we have, like he plays the accordion and we play polka music during the Christmas season, and he likes to do that to reminisce on the Czech culture. And also, the reason that we have this dish called knedli is because it is a famous Czechoslovakian dish, which is basically just like a dumpling with pork in it. Hope to show you the culture, some of the background information, its language, cuisine, and some of its political history. So the Czech Republic is a country in Eastern Europe, but it's much older than the 26-year-old country that it is. It first originated from Celtic and German cultures. They left their impact from the Slavic-speaking people around, and they kind of made this country that began in the 6th century AD. It wasn't until 4 centuries later that the Czech culture was actually formed in the 10th century, and that's when they became Czechoslovakia. But in 1993, January 1st, 1993, after many disputes between the Slovakian culture and the Czech culture, they decided to separate into two independent states, and this was called the Velvet Divorce. And this was, again, January 1st, 1993. And so a little bit about the language. The Czech Republic, Czech is the most commonly spoken language. 96% of the people there speak it. Other languages are the Slavic language, German, Polish, and the rest are just like 1% of different languages and stuff. Language developed in the 10th century when it began to separate from the Slovakian language, and then it began to have its written form soon after that. A little bit about the Czech cuisine. The cuisine shares many characteristics with its neighboring countries, including Austria, Germany, Hungary. Breakfast is usually served with coffee or tea, and then like a bread with some sort of jam, and often like a cold complementary meat with that. And then lunch is served with like a soup, sometimes a bread, and then they have a certain entree, which they use a lot of meats and potatoes, specifically pork, a lot of lean meats with that. And then most of the time they have a dessert at the end of their lunch. Like I said, dumplings, pork, and other lean meats are like the staples of the Czech cuisine, along with potatoes, other sorts of vegetables, squashes, all sorts of things. And they use one of their main ingredients in all of their different meals is flour. They love to use the flour. They use a lot of dumplings, a lot, and so the dinners are usually the heaviest meal of the day, served with a side of goulash, and then of course like the meat and potatoes and all sorts of different combinations of that. And then just a little bit about their political history. During the Cold War, when the communist oppression was in mass effect, Czechoslovakia became the communist country under the Soviet regime, but they remained under their own constitution. This made the country's political system very distorted. There was lots of issues with that. In 1948, communism became the sole entity of their political system, and then it wasn't until 41 years later, in 1989, when the Communist Party fell, and then their takeover was the democratic system. This system includes a president, parliament, chamber of deputies, senate, and a few other different roles in the government. So I was hope that to properly inform you about the aspects of Czech culture, including its cultural development, its language, flavorful cuisine, and their political history.
Top of the morning to ya. Oh, you're not wearing green? I'm gonna pinch you. Luck of the Irish. Breakfast, drink. Dinner, drink. Supper, drink. These are all just a few Irish misconceptions that many of us listen to. And this is how I viewed the Irish heritage as well. But after conducting short interviews with both my parents and my grandma, I learned that Ireland is more than just those drinking and wearing green. Every culture has their customs and traditions, and today we're all going to learn a little bit about the Irish culture. From both sides, I earn a few different heritages: Irish, English, Hispanic, and German. But one I share with both my mom and my dad is Irish. And although I share it with both of them, it's the culture I know the least about. Today, I will talk with you what I learned about Ireland, such as national identity and the true St. Patrick's Day, food customs, and family beliefs. Ireland, like many other countries, including America, was once conquered and controlled by the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom conquered Ireland in 1169, and it wasn't until 1922 when the Irish gained independence. In 1922, the Irish War of Independence happened, and most of Ireland ceded from the UK. However, under their independence, there was one condition. Ireland must cut out a section for the Protestants. 6 of the northeastern counties remain under the control of the United Kingdom. Ireland and Northern Ireland have tension to this day. The Irish Republican Army and Northern Ireland have brutal fights, terrorist attacks on each other. Still to this day, it was mostly strong throughout the 1900s with bombs and murders. One of the biggest tensions that they had when under control of the UK was religion. Most of people from the UK that controlled Ireland were Protestant, and before Ireland was Christian, so there was a lot of tension between Christian and the Protestants. And this leads into St. Patrick's Day with one of their traditions, which was to wear shamrocks. Shamrocks were their way of showing and representing Christianity as a holiday. St. Patrick's Day is on March 17th of every year. It's a day to celebrate a patron saint, St. Patrick. St. Patrick was born in Britain and then was kidnapped and taken to Ireland as a slave. He escaped, but returned later in life to convert the country to Christianity. He established monasteries, churches, and schools, and many legends revolve around him. And Ireland came to celebrate this day with feast and religious service. Then Irish immigrants brought this day to America to celebrate all things Irish. There are parades, many things green, corned beef and cabbage, and beer. The St. Patrick's Day that we know today is Americanized, to say. On St. Patrick's Day, my family wears green, and my dad always makes shepherd's pie, and he dyes the potatoes green. He does. This brings us to food in daily life. The typical meal includes meat and potatoes, and a few other vegetables. They also have stews and rolls. Their meals include breakfast, dinner, which we know as lunch, and then in between dinner and supper, they have a tea where they usually drink tea and then a bread of some sort. And then they have supper, and supper is one of the biggest meals. And then into drinking habits, because everybody makes jokes that Irish people drink a lot. Their pubs used to be split in two sections, one for just the men and the other for the men and women, and drinks are always bought in rounds. And then some of their famously known drinks are Irish whiskey and then Guinness beer. Sorry, what is this? Moving on to family. Marriage is, I'm gonna struggle with this word, I don't know how to say it, monogamous, yes, sorry, which means that when you stick with one person and they believe that you should be married with them or be with them for a long time. And this is why divorce wasn't legal until 1995, which is way different than what it is here, because although before divorce here wasn't illegal, but it was kind of frowned upon, theirs was illegal. And then inheritance is usually left to one son, and it's left to the son that's going to continue the family farm. Moving on to kinship, the family revolves around the nuclear family, so your siblings and your parents, and then grandparents come into that, and all the children adopt their surname like we do here. And then first names are usually Christian after their ancestors, and now Ireland is mostly Catholic, so they have names of Catholic saints. Oh my gosh. My grandma is named Sylvia O'Brien, and O'Brien is a very Irish last name. And on here I have some of the Irish last names like Guinness, O'Brien, and Doyle, which is my aunt's last name. And there is a castle that my grandma always talks about. It's the O'Brien Castle. And the O before a last name means descendant. So in conclusion, I learned a lot about the Irish culture, and it's very unique and intriguing, and the country is beautiful. And my parents grew up as a typical American family where they didn't practice a lot of their cultural backgrounds, and I'm glad I learned more about it.
Cheese markets, wooden shoes, I can only be talking about one country, the Netherlands. This country shares borders with Belgium and Germany. It's over here. And even if it's not the biggest country in Europe, it is the most densely populated one according to World Population Review. Today, I'm going to inform you of the history and traditions of the Dutch culture or culture of the Netherlands and what it is like today. First, I'll talk about the Dutch and its language and its roots. Second, I'll inform you of the different historical Dutch traditions, festive events, and holidays. And finally, I'll discuss the gastronomy or food culture in the Netherlands. Before starting, however, I would like to mention that in order to write this speech, I interviewed my host mother, Robin Olsen. And she told me that her heritage was German, Dutch, Irish, and Native American. She also told me that for Christmas especially, they used to eat Dutch cookies, and that's what inspired me and gave me the motivation to write this speech about the Netherlands. To begin with, as most of you know, the official language in the Netherlands is the Dutch. It's not spoken only in the Netherlands, however, it's also the official language in Aruba, Brussels, Curaçao, Flanders, Sint Maarten, and Suriname. It belongs to the West Germanic family of languages, along with German and English, and there are many different dialects of the Dutch language, such as the Low Saxon and the Limburgish dialects. Another interesting fact about the language in this country, the Netherlands, is that they have the highest English proficiency in non-native English speakers, with 89% of the total population speaking fluent English and 70% of the total population speaking fluent German. Moving on to their traditions, the first one I'm going to be talking about is St. Nicholas. It's celebrated on December 5th, and it's the evening before St. Nicholas's birthday on December 6th. Some people call it the equivalent of Santa Claus. However, in the Netherlands, they also refer to him as the Holy Good Man. Their national holiday is on April 27th, and it's called King's Day. They celebrate King Willem-Alexander of the Netherlands' birthday. And they used to celebrate Queen's Day on April 30th, when the former Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands was the queen. Their national color is orange, and they dress with only orange on their national holiday. And they also do that for big sporting events. They have other regional traditions like Easter bonfires and St. Martin's Day on November 11th. And in this tradition, St. Martin, children go door to door singing songs for treats. I also wanted to tell you guys about the clogs or the wooden shoes. They are a tourist icon in the Netherlands, but however, they're not worn in big cities. If you go out of the big cities, you may see some farmers still using them. But the origin of these shoes, they are protective footwear for jobs like in agriculture, factories, and mines. And they are also used in several traditional dances in other countries also. Moving on to their food. It's very different from one region to another inside the country. In general, they consume lots of vegetables compared to the meat, and they also eat lots of dairy products. As you guys know, Dutch cheeses are known worldwide, and lots of their traditional dishes include cheese. And some examples of their traditional Dutch dishes are endive stew, pea soup, hotspot, which are mashed carrots, and Dutch meatballs, etc. Traditionally, they also consume beer way more than wine, which is different from France, for example. However, Southern Dutch cuisine is the only one that developed into high-level establishment cuisine, like expensive and high quality, and it's very influenced by German and French food traditions. Finally, with the desserts and the sweets, they have a very wide variety of Dutch pastries, cookies, pies, and cakes. An interesting fact is that the word cookie actually comes from the Dutch, and they frequently use fruits in their desserts, and some examples of their traditional Dutch desserts are apple pies, blij, which is the traditional Dutch pie, Dutch donuts, speculoos, which are fall cookies, profiteroles dipped in chocolate, very detailed animal-shaped cookies, waffles, butter biscuits, etc. To conclude, today I informed you of the history of the Dutch culture and how it is nowadays. I talked about the language and its origins, the different Dutch traditions in the Netherlands, and their food culture and gastronomy. I hope that after this speech you realize how interesting and diverse the Dutch culture is.